Welcome to this edition of AWS On Air Community Voices. I'm your host, Aileen Gemma Smith, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm the head of developer relations for AWS for the online and America teams. Today, I am so excited to welcome you to this episode with our AWS Community Builders. Just so folks know, AWS Community Builders program launched earlier this year. It offers technical resources, mentorship, and networking opportunities to AWS enthusiasts and emerging thought leaders who are passionate about sharing knowledge and connecting with the technical community. Did you know that there are over 800 AWS community builders just in the first year of the program, and they hail from over 66 different countries on 6 continents? The application for the program to join will reopen in spring of next year, and there's a waiting list where you can sign up. But I want to get started, and again, it is such a privilege to have folks that come from so many diverse backgrounds that represent our global cohort of community builders. Today, I've got 4 wonderful builders with me. I'd love to go around and have everyone introduce themselves. Bart?
Hey friends, hello, welcome to our AWS On Air session. My name is Bart Castle. I am a cloud solutions architect and trainer and a consultant in the broad world of cloud computing, and I am super excited to be a part of the Community Builders program, hanging out with Liz and Ivonne and Michael and Eileen. And you out there as well, because it really is all about you living out there, people who are part of the AWS community and looking to make a bigger role in the broad world of tech. So I'm really excited to just share a little bit about ReInvent and some of the fun things we're doing in the community.
Wonderful. Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz Fong-Jones. I'm the principal developer advocate at honeycomb.io, which helps developers understand their software through observability. And I've been involved in many different uses of AWS, ranging from Graviton 2 to serverless to observability management and governance. So I'm really passionate to share what I learn with the community and to listen to all of you.
Wonderful. Ivonne?
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you guys here on the show. Looking forward to talking with you guys. My name is Ivonne Roberts, like she mentioned. I'm a principal software engineer at Edelman Financial Engines. I focus on building modern application architecture, specifically serverless, as part of cloud migration initiatives. And on the side, I do a little bit of prototyping, researching, building reference architectures. I started building 100, 200 level serverless content on AWS, specifically on my channel as well.
Michael?
Awesome. Yvonne's being modest. She is also an amazing painter, by the way, as you can see behind her. Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Liendo. I'm a senior software engineer over at EchoBind. At the agency, I primarily focus on web, mobile, and serverless integrations. You can typically find me blogging about AWS Amplify, serverless architectures on Dev2, as well as my YouTube channel. So feel free to check me out.
Awesome, awesome. And certainly this is a live show, and we hope for folks that are tuning in, if you want to give a shout out to the folks that you know in your community, please do so. And if you've got questions for us, please tweet at AWS On Air, and the team will get those questions to us so we can answer live and in real time. So let's get started. First off, can we talk about what's the experience for you of being a community builder, and what does that mean now that you're here at this virtual experience of reInvent?
I definitely think that one of the cool things about being a community builder is interacting with so many other folks who know so much about AWS's products. Like, I can ask questions about how exactly does this detailed Lambda work, and someone from the community will answer, or if they can't answer, that a AWS employee will answer. I think that's really, really neat to have those direct interactions, and also to see how responsive the AWS team is to our feedback about the features they're developing.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the coolest thing I've seen is, of course, meeting with the folks that are here on the chat today, but having like folks from the developer relations, advocacy parts of AWS dipping directly in there together, other big key members in the community as well, broader parts of the social networking world. It is a crossroads. And so we're all able to share adventures and, of course, learn a whole lot from one another, which is what I get really passionate about. I love training and getting people excited about the career opportunities that are out there in cloud.
Definitely.
Especially,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, especially working with you guys, getting to meet Bart and Liz and Michael and a lot of other community builders as well. The interaction is awesome. We can kind of like spitball different ideas and say, okay, is this feasible? Am I crazy? And going and talking about the different events at AWS as well, and getting everybody else's feedback has been pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. I think we're finding out like there's two separate segments here. There's like the whole networking aspect, which
Yeah,
has just been amazing. It opens up its own set of opportunities.
yeah.
And then on top of that, it makes you realize like I might be very well experienced in this particular architecture, but it really opens your eyes to just like how vast the AWS service plane goes. It's crazy.
Oh man, and we're all suffering from. I know I get it. I get the imposter syndrome bad. So being a part of the community is a great chance to just rub shoulders with everybody and kind of bolster each other too. I love supporting one another.
Well, that's one of the
For
most
sure.
exciting things about the community, right? Is it's so warm and it's so receptive. And I think also for folks that are newer to tech or they're just getting started, knowing that there's a welcoming community where it's okay to say, I don't know how to do this. Here, let me help you out. And we've all been there. One of the things that I appreciate when folks are doing live demos is like, oh, wait, stuff this thing up here. This is a challenge. Like we all do that learning out loud. And I think sometimes that can be really empowering for other folks to see like we're all still figuring these things out. It's more about how do we push the boundaries of what can be possible instead of how do I show you all the things that I know that are all big and important.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, there's been many situations where I've been working with something and I just thought I knew it in and out. And then you get to a point, it's like, no, no, I can be open about the fact that I need help on this. And
Yeah.
now we have this entire team of individuals who are also very experienced in it. And then we can piggyback our ideas off each other. To Yvonne's point, I mean, we could really push the bounds on what we can do with the services we know, and then also reach out about the things that we don't know.
Well, so if we're all about community, talk to me about the kinds of communities that you're building. Talk to me about what you've seen or what their reflections are based on reInvent so far.
Well,
It's the dreaded who's gonna go first.
I know
There's
who's
a
gonna go
lag.
first.
Hit the
Well,
buzzer.
one of the things for me, I work with companies who are learning, and I work with learners who are going to someday be helping these companies as well. And so when I look at reInvent and I see the types of things that they're announcing, there is one really big exciting part of it, and that there's so much work to be done in evangelizing what cloud can do for us, what serverless is, and
Mhm.
how it can solve problems. What the big value prop is behind having someone like AWS managing your services for you. It's a huge value proposition, and it's also a great chance for us to really get excited about the work itself to be done. And when we think about people who are in the community, ultimately that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to land jobs, they're trying to support problem solving efforts, they're trying to drive value and efficiency for their organizations. And those are all perfectly aligned with what the AWS cloud goals are. So I love seeing the tools come together, especially when you look at like the machine learning and the AI tools that are coming out, or the software as a service architected framework pieces that are coming out. These are all patterns that say there is lots of work to be done. Organizations need help and they need workforces to do this work. So I'm excited about trying to get people energized about the career opportunities that this represents. Lots of work to do for us all out there.
Indeed.
For me, the experience with cultivating a community has been around the ARM64 ecosystem and
Okay.
Graviton 2. So you may have seen that my company was featured in the Andy Jassy keynote from a couple weeks ago. But we were an early adopter of Graviton 2, right? Like it took being an expert in some of the Linux internals in order to adopt Graviton 2. So kind of figuring out both how do we make the onboarding experience easier for people who are new to this, as well as helping introduce people to just seamlessly migrate things that are already managed services, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been interesting kind of building out that community of people who are utilizing the ARM64 architecture and helping really grow that community so that people can take advantage of this technology that is faster, that is cheaper, and that is 3 times better for the environment. Like, how could you say no to that?
Powerful.
100%.
This
So
this year in
let's talk.
particular, if no, if you want to, what do we got next? What do we got? I was gonna say this year in particular, I've noticed that like AWS has really, to Liz's point, encapsulated a lot of their own services and just wrapped them up. I mean, you have things like
Yeah.
CDK version 2 coming up, and it's just okay, we have these solutions, but they haven't been the easiest thing to get started with when it came to onboarding and things like that. So let's just create another wrapper around it, and then that way you don't have to worry about that. It's a managed service, so let us manage it for you.
Yeah, and that brings a lot of equity in terms of how we can get other folks at different points in the spectrum to now say, I want to be able to use this solution. And if I don't happen to have this expertise on our bench, we still have a path in. And I think that's one of the really neat things about the evolution. Ivonne, I'm curious to hear from you. Talk to me about what you've seen in the kinds of communities that you're building, supporting, and what the kind of reflections you've had from reInvent so far.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun kind of going through all the different releases and playing around with them and talking to folks, coworkers, as well as, on the Twitter community. I've really been interested, like Michael was mentioning, kind of wrapping up these services that kind of help make migrating to the cloud, moving to these modern applications more palatable, I should say, like time frame wise for a company. Like Bart said, a lot of companies don't have that full on expertise in house to be able to completely reinvent their applications. And some of these features, like having the ability to use Kafka self-managed, for example, as an event source to Lambda, now that team doesn't have to worry about moving their message broker into AWS, and they can now fully focus on building microservices with what they have today. I really have enjoyed, and people that I have talked to as well, enjoyed kind of seeing that bundling happening, like Michael mentioned.
They're like striking the integration barriers down left and right. It's awesome.
Exactly.
Another one I thought was interesting was like, I know we talk about hybrid and multi-cloud and some of those roles, but I thought it's interesting to see the pathway of like Outposts and Wavelength. Some of these, I mean, Liz already mentioned some of the hardware pieces, but a lot of hardware and infrastructure news happening this year, even in 2020, where we think that, I admit, I caught myself earlier this year at VMware World saying, oh, hardware's passe, but there's so much to be done and won through that. And arguably some of our toughest data center problems, like efficiency and the global impact on it, they're being solved by hardware solutions.
Efficiency and productivity, right? Like, I think that is what is most exciting about Outposts, is being able to lower latency every 50 milliseconds that you save for millions of users, right? Like, that starts to add up to human lifetimes of productivity that you're giving back to people.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but and when you think about the scale of that, that's completely transformational. So let's talk about we've got 3 weeks of content, which is amazing. All of it will be available later on video on demand, so you can catch up and spend weekends. I know I certainly will be, with some nice cocoa and like, ooh, cool, I want to see more demos. What are you most excited about from the keynotes that you've seen, or from any of the presentations that you've attended so far? And what are you recommending to folks that are tuning in to make sure to check out?
It was so good you had to say it twice.
I know, it was awesome.
I'm on my own reverb.
Jason Fulgham, I mentioned CDK version 2 dropping, and he gave a talk the other day about everything new, and he came up with a site. It is cdkworkshop.com, and I just haven't had the time yet, but I'm definitely going to be diving into that because he really just sort of breaks it down on here's what you need to know, here's how you can quickly get up and going. And again, we're just talking about lowering the barrier to entry on things. That's going to be an amazing productivity boost when it comes to teams and having these managed services integrated for you.
Oh, so many good tools. Not besides the services too. The unified search, Cloud Shell. Those are two big things that I know that they're visually, there's a disruptor there at first in the management console, but in general, I'm excited about that. Those are things that I saw Azure doing that I wanted to see happen in AWS land. So I'm excited to see where they are now. Of course, they'll keep improving down the road.
I definitely have enjoyed the search. As silly as this may sound, when you would go and click on the services tab and you would put in SES, simple email service would not come up. And now being able to put that in that search bar, SES, and have it come up, it's been quite exciting. Something I'm looking forward to playing with, to your question, Eileen, is the containers on Lambda. I think it's pretty interesting. I think there's ways that you can say companies may abuse it. I don't know. They might think, okay, I have this monolithic application that's RESTful. I can lambdize it, or for lack of a better word. And then, hey, look, I'm serverless now. But I think it has also a lot of cool applications. Like, for example, we can now do a little bit more control over our own runtimes, having the runtime API exposed there. But also, I thought one thing that was interesting is like the concept of ECS anywhere, right? there are people who, let's say, because of what data center they're in, they're not able to go into Lambda because of latency issues, et cetera, until, let's say, their database or their monolithic application has been moved to the cloud. And those like heavy lifting can take some time.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, for example, a company could then say, okay, let's leverage ECS Anywhere, when it comes out next year. Let's, build these microservices, modern application. Theoretically, you can argue that they could be very small microservice subsets that could then turn around when they move to the cloud and pick them up and just lambdize those containers. And I think that's pretty cool. That gives that those teams like the ability to start running. And I'm looking forward to playing with those features and learning a little bit more and see if that theory is even feasible to start with.
I definitely think that kind of easing the on-ramp onto cloud native, right? Like the more you make it possible for people to migrate their monoliths and then do the strangler fig pattern and decompose it, right? Like the more you make it easier to do that, right? Like the more people will adopt, right? We see a lot of enterprises that are kind of doing this. We are going to migrate our monolith and we're just going to decompose it all at once. And that doesn't work, right? Like, so offering people these routes really makes it so much easier.
It definitely takes time for sure. I mean, years. We're not talking about, let's take a month or 2 months and let's redo all of this. I mean, it took, let's say, a decade to build this monolithic application, and no one's has
Not a weekend project.
yeah, I don't think no one has the strength, the mental capacity, the resource to, like you say, do it over a weekend. So these features I think are key.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
It's also a chance for them to start working with the IAM layers there too. I know rigging up the security components around the outsides of this, that's a huge operational burden for lots of companies, like real world. So yep, on-ramps are on their way.
I'm gonna throw that quick shout out to the Amplify team because I don't have to worry about those IAM controls. I'm just like, do it for me because I'm gonna screw it up like I have in the past. But Ivonne, you brought up, just the fact that Lambda now supports containers is like, okay, cool. And then the Amplify team was like, let's go ahead and work that into our project. And then shout out to Lambda, by the way. I mean, it went from like you were being billed for like 100 milliseconds, and then now you're just being billed per millisecond. It's like you don't even have to do anything and you're saving money. It's amazing.
Right. I think that's kind of the exciting thing about many of the keynote announcements, where there are things that are either automatic or that you don't have to understand very much. Right. For instance, I know Corey Quinn, a fellow community builder, is really, really excited about GP3, which yes, you just need to set it. You set your running instances to use, and suddenly you're saving money.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think the kind of sessions that I want to dig into afterwards to answer Eileen's question about what are you going to watch afterwards, I'm really interested to go back and look at what the AWS observability team has done around managed Grafana, managed Prometheus. And I know Yana Dogan did a really great talk on that I haven't had time to go back and watch that I want to.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's one of the great opportunities in having so much content that's now available on demand. We can absolutely dig into this later on and say, okay, great. Now I'm just going to take the weekend and do this. Whereas in live reInvent, okay, we've got a week running around and it's all suddenly gone. And I think actually from a learner's point of view, this is so much of a richer experience because it's all there. You can almost sort of say, all right, I'm going to do a watch party with my team for the weekend because we're just going to geek out and we'd like to create a catalog in that way. So I know that we've leaned into a bit about how some of these managed services can now put wrappers around and how we've talked about how things are simplifying. For folks, and especially thinking about within the communities that we support, for folks that are getting started, are there any sessions or any things that you want to call out for them that would be great to get your hands wrapped around how we're doing all this stuff?
I can lead that one. Shout out to Chris Kampner. He's a solutions architect. He has oh geez, I have it written down on a post-it. Getstarted.awsworkshop.io. If we can throw that in the chat. He created that, and it just shows you sort of the business value and walks you through the steps on how to create your first production workloads with AWS. And it has features that might not apply but could apply later. And it's just a super good getting starting point when it comes to AWS and learning about the underlying services themselves.
I would also call out the hashtag serverless for everyone group that like Rob, Eric, and James and all the serverless crew are kind of pushing over there. I think it's a great entryway into CDK and to SAM. They bring you some real world applications. They give you a chance to understand what kind of problems you can solve and then what tools are well aligned for that. And then, of course, there's plenty of 200, 300, 400 series stuff to get into beyond that.
Totally, totally. So I also want to, we're keeping an eye on the Twitch chat. So if folks have questions, give a shout out. We're happy to answer it. For folks that might also want to ask questions on Twitter, you can hit us up at AWS on air. We're interested in supporting and hearing from you. I see that there's some conversations going on about 11-year-olds, getting up on stage and talking about the work and the things that they've done. So that's pretty exciting. So what else do we want to share? In terms of there is so much there, favorite points from keynotes or other sessions you want to give a call out to?
Well, I was just going to say, when somebody brought up earlier, we are here with the AWS Community Heroes. A lot of them are in the Community Builder program as well. And so for me, when I first got into reInvent a few years back, when the hero lists and some of their curated lists of sessions came out, that was a huge lifesaver for me, because I admit I was just drowning in the ocean of sessions and finding some key ones that I could hone in on. So looking for the hero curated content is a great place to start. I know several of the friends, shout out to the 100 Days of Cloud community out there. Lots of great folks getting into the learning community out there. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Quite a few heroes in that space, specifically Hero, and also Andrew Brown and some of my other kind of learner trainer friends there as well. But those are great resources and great starting points, especially when you look at some of their tracks too. So you don't have to be overwhelmed. Look for track-based content that might be relevant to you and filter by the detail level.
Any other tips for folks that this might be the first reInvent? I mean, we've had several 100,000 folks sign up for it, which is really, really exciting. So I would respectfully posit some folks, this is the first time for reInvent. So what other reflections, aside from definitely take a look at those hero guides, would be great for them to know about the experience?
I really have enjoyed the serverless land. They've been doing those sessions twice a week or something like that.
Nice.
I think they're on number 5 or 6 at this point. Those have been really good talks. They even do some deep dives on some of the things that have been released the previous day to go check out and get excited about the releases and some of the sessions that have happened.
Definitely. Quick shout out to someone in the chat, Byron Watts. Hey, what's up? He's someone that I used to work in a local meetup group together. There he is.
Nice.
Great to see that you're in the chat. Welcome. But yeah, to answer Eileen's question, I really like the case studies. So Zach Cantor, he's the CEO of Steady. He has that whole what's the business use case for serverless, and he had an amazing slide, which was when people think of serverless, they think of Lambda. It's like Lambda doesn't equal services, equal serverless. What's the point of his slide? It equals functions as a service. Whereas you really want to get into those managed services, and talks like that, they really help first-time reinventors understand how you can bring that value to your organization. And when you say, I want to make the switch to serverless instead of this monolith, how we can use managed services, because it doesn't just mean Lambda. You can bring in Cognito, you can bring in DynamoDB, all that other good stuff.
I think what's key when you bring up serverless is, your organization, your company is focused on providing service X, right? You should not have to have a whole nother team just around operations and things that have nothing to do with your bottom line, with your profit. Exactly, right? And so you should outsource that, for lack of a better word, to AWS, right? And these managed services kind of help us, focus on our core business goals and our bottom line.
I really love that focus on the kind of what are we trying to accomplish for our customers? What can we make, what can we make extraneous, right? Like anything that's extraneous, have AWS handle it for you. Have an AWS partner handle it for you, right? Like there are so many different resources and services that you can use. For instance, like why are you running your own MySQL? Use RDS, right? Why are you, running your own Elk stack for observability, right? Like use some kind of managed service provider, right? I think that makes your life so much easier. You can just focus on writing that code.
Just focus on the differentiator. That's the thing that matters.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, the other ones that I love to talk about too, whenever I get into the serverless conversation, Alex Debris and Houlihan, Jeremy Daly, all the guys out there doing, I don't mean the guys, all the crew out there doing the data modeling parts of it, single table design. There's something wildly interesting to me about making the data work for your application. So long we've been burdened by the data, and you just talk to any data analytics person out there who has suffered ETL at some point. You know that we're not thinking about how to consume the data that we're generating until many apps later on. So early on, designing for data, those are great ones. So any of the lessons around data modeling and advanced DynamoDB design, build yourself up through there. It's not just knowing tables and attributes and keys, it's how to actually put all those functionally together to solve application problems. So again, you can differentiate your competitive edge.
Yeah, and I think some of that too also comes back to what you said earlier, Michael. Like the case studies are really interesting because it's taking us through, here's this real world serious pain point. What are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? And I also think that's a huge opportunity within the community to say, like, well, these are problems that we care about. These are things that we're seeing and that folks in our networks are solving. And again, that same question of, okay, well, where do I begin with this? Or this seems wildly inefficient, but I don't know what I don't know about how to make it more efficient. Help me out with that. And I do think that's a huge part of the role the community serves.
Yeah.
I had a question for the other folks on here. How much time do you feel like you had to struggle through like learning how to do content creation? Has the Community Builders program helped you with that part of it, the actual producing videos, making slides, producing presentations?
I think my perspective is slightly different because I am a developer advocate. That's my job. I, produce content for Honeycomb, and therefore, doing content highlighting how Honeycomb is using AWS is just part of my job. So I kind of am more kind of coaching and helping other people rather than needing to ask for advice in that particular area.
Sure.
For me, I did spend some time basically being an internal developer advocate, for lack of a better word. And, it was a lot easier to plan a meeting and have folks, log in and, have a conversation about some reference architecture that I built. Turning that content and making it public and productizing, for lack of a better word, my content. It really has been awesome to, talk to different folks and get advice. Like, how do I do this? What's a better way to show this? And that has been pretty awesome with folks.
Well,
That's
obviously,
super interesting because I'm actually on the other side of that, where I started out creating content publicly, and then now with the company that I'm at Echobind, we're transitioning to having these managed services incorporated in our applications, and I'm making that push to push all of that to the cloud. That's
They're
funny.
like multimedia ninjas these days. I love it.
Which is to say, right, like to build a community doesn't mean only building a public community, right? Like you can be a community builder in your own workplace, right? Internal DevRel is so important. And Ivonne, I'm so glad that you did that before.
Well, let's lean into that a
more.
bit. Yeah, but let's lean into that a little bit more because obviously I'm the head of developer relations and advocacy here. So yay, we want to see more folks that are advocating because there is that role of being teacher and facilitator and internal ambassador because you need to win over those champions or you need to be able to act as the liaison between different groups to help to translate, well, this is why this matters. So I'd love to hear from you more, Liz, on how you see advocacy and why that's important, because I do think that's an aspect of change management within organizations. So I'd love to hear your points of view on that.
Yeah, I think that advocacy is not just talking at people, right? I think it's also listening and incorporating that feedback back into the products, right? And that's actually why I really look up to the AWS team because they do that all the time, right? Like they're not just saying, use this really cool feature. They're also saying, hey, if this isn't working for you, right, like let's adjust it, right? If you're building a platform as a platform team and no one is using your platform because they can't use it, it's not solving the right business problem, right? Like you need to adapt or people are going to do shadow IT. So I think that's kind of an important element of advocacy. It's not just kind of sharing with people, like saying things they can be doing, but like listening to what people need.
100%. Ivonne, what about your perspectives?
I think one thing, so I mentioned before, right? Let's let companies focus on their core business. I think you can take that and bring that to your teams, let's say in your corporate office, where let's let those teams focus on the core features that they're responsible for. And then let's us as the developer advocates, as the trainers, look and listen to what their pain points are, then go figure it out and then teach them. Like, okay, look, you had this problem. I found this really awesome solution. Here's some reference architecture. Take this and go build it. And they can, focus on their metrics and their bottom line and take this reference architecture that you've facilitated them to be able to move forward.
For
And I
sure.
think that's key.
Definitely. To even take that a step further, there's also sort of like the political aspect to it, because I've had to navigate those conversations where, hey, if we're bringing in these managed services, does that put my job at jeopardy? Since previously, you might be working with like an ops team. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, no, no. If anything, like it frees you up, so that way instead of having to scale vertically, we can scale horizontally, and we can add more business value without having to do much more work.
I love it. The Cloud Raptors are coming for my job. Ah!
Nice.
Oh,
No,
fuck
I've
that.
seen so many teams go through this as part of their cloud transition, right? Like it's people are genuinely afraid for their jobs, and you
Yeah.
have to emphasize to them, like, I upskilled, you can do it too, right? Like I came from
Yes.
an ops background. I didn't have any formal software engineering training, right? Like, and here I am, right? Like I think the message is everyone can become a DevOps or site reliability engineer, right? Like regardless of whether you're starting from software engineering, right? Like, you're not going to get handed this like awful system, right? We'll help teach you to run it. Or if you're an ops person, right, like we'll help you scale out that impact so that you can work on much larger systems.
Yeah. And as we think about upskilling and reskilling, and Bart, I know that you've got experience in this field for how are we doing these, trainings and courses and things like that. What advice do you have for folks that are tuning in?
Yeah, so I really kind of think of three different parts of the training paradigm. So I was an AWS trainer for AWS when they first started the partner training program with Global Knowledge years ago. And now I've moved on to become my own trainer here with CBT Nuggets. But the big thing for me is, of course, keeping people enthusiastic is kind of like the heart of the whole thing. Like you've got to have a direct goal that you're trying to reach. So
Yep.
trying to really contextualize why people should have jobs is important, but what it's going to enable them in their own lives is just equally as important to me. I see a career as a tool to happiness. And very few of us, or maybe less of us, actually see the tech career as the end goal itself. So usually it should be some sort of enabling force. But the
Yeah, and your
other,
job should not make you miserable, right? Like if you are getting paged at 2 a.m. night after night after night, right? Like
no.
your life can be so much better, right?
Oh.
Like there are better ways.
And those horror stories scare people off, and the internet is abound with them. So the final part then is becoming a lifelong learner and being passionate about it, and getting to a point where you can inspire others. So I really appreciate Liz's shout out to building communities internally. They don't have to be big public things.
Yeah.
A community of 5 is a great starting point. Just share your stories, teach publicly, learn out visibly, and you're going to inspire others. And I think that'll keep you excited as well.
Yeah, and again, it is all about earning that genuine trust as you're connected, right? It's not, oh wow, our community is bigger than your community. Like, is our community genuine, engaged? Well, then, yay, that's what's most important. But I think also too, to come back to a point that you said, Liz, if you're in an environment that's not supportive, then use your community to find paths elsewhere and to think about what's the next step, right? The context that you have one particular day does not have to be the context forever and ever. And just because you may be in a negative experience right now, I just think that there is so many positive, supportive, and inclusive places that we find where folks are bringing one another up, and it's a different type of positive environment. Let's lean into those. Let's create opportunities for folks in those. I think that that's something very important. And obviously, when we see challenges, to call them out and to help to bring around changes in the organizations that we're in.
Yeah, and learning those cloud native skills is such a, golden ticket, right? Like it helps you get into organizations that are doing things in the same way that other orgs are modernizing.
It's a good litmus.
Yeah. But it's hard being a lifelong learner because then you have to constantly say, all right, am I curious? And wait, I don't know all the things. Sometimes we get to a point where like say, I'm here in my career, I know all the things. Like, actually, I don't know any of the things. And I want to get more into this because there's a whole new category of possibilities that didn't exist back when we were in university or back when started out, being the expert. And I just also think there's so much value to embracing that learner's mindset, right? Where I've got this beginner's mindset, I'm just starting out, but also I want to figure stuff out. And I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about the Community Builders program is here's how we're enabling and supporting folks all throughout different points in their career journeys, all throughout different points in where they are for their level of expertise to say, let's come together. Again, we've got 800 folks all over the world. And again, I encourage the folks that are tuning in, learn more about the program. If you're interested in applying, like, go for it and do it. And I would actually love if the panel would comment on some of the things like, what is the value that you've gotten out of the Community Builders program so far? And what are you most excited about now that you're a part of it?
For me, it's been a mix of opportunity and legitimacy. Being a part of the AWS Community Builders program gives you that sort of badge, like, hey, not only am I more or less an expert in a certain area, I can also help provide value by um, what is it? Being that junior developer mindset, like I can explain things to you in a way that a junior developer would understand, which is a skill that is unfortunately often lost when we um, transition to senior developers. I see that all too often, where you sort of forget how to talk to someone when they're in the early stages. But being part of this program, you're constantly giving that feedback. So
Yeah.
that's what I love.
I think to your point, those early stages, right? A lot of these community developers were kind of like from all different levels in our career. There's folks that
Yes.
are just starting out. And I think it's so important for people that are just starting out to share their experience because I feel like they speak the language maybe a little better than some of us who
Mhm.
have been developing for 15, 20 years. Um, and also to add to that, I feel like, if you are in that mindset of constant learner, I feel like you kind of go through cycles of like imposter syndrome, then like, oh yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing now, I am actually speaking the right thing.
No.
And then again, like, oh,
Mhm.
there's all these new things, these are so cool, but I don't know how they work. And it's really important to kind of keep that learning mantra, for lack of a better word. And the community builders, that's like one thing that I've definitely have gotten out of is kind of like those different walks of your career and how you're experiencing some of these services and features and learning.
Yeah, I think seeing what other people's questions are and asking my own questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It both improves my knowledge of AWS, but it also lets the AWS team see where's their confusion, where are people confused by stuff, right? And conversely, when I see what questions people ask about my space, about observability, right, it means that helps me build Honeycomb's products better because I can understand where are the pain points. So that's
Yeah.
been really, really valuable is to get that diverse range of perspectives from people that I wouldn't necessarily talk to every day otherwise.
And that's also
Yeah.
one of the privileges of online communities as well, is we can be completely borderless. And sometimes that can open up opportunities for folks to connect and be in touch with one another. Whereas if we just had to do all things in person all the time, oh my goodness, it's 4 hours to get to where you are. That's simply not happening. Or,
Yeah, I was saying that both
right?
about reInvent and about KubeCon, right? The fact that the price of entry is, $100 or $0, right? Like, and you can attend from your desk, that makes it
Yeah.
possible to reach so many more people than you could fit in, 5 hotels in Las Vegas. And I think that that's a huge advantage. And, I'd be sad if that goes away next year if we go back to physical events, right? Like, I don't want to exclude people who can't afford to travel.
And
Yeah.
to add to that, one thing that
Good
has
call.
been kind of nice is, now that we are, remote, everybody is online, having that community to be able to talk through some of these releases is really awesome because, when you're there, when you're at reInvent, it's awesome to hear other people's questions and kind of see, where they're going with the same talk that you just watched, but it never occurred to you XYZ, right? And having that community now with community builders to be able to watch reInvent and have those same conversations. It's been pretty cool. I mean, I still miss like the in-person reInvent, but this has been a really nice way to go through it as well.
I just saw a question come through in the comments there about how is AWS pulling from the builders program. I thought that was really relevant here too, that AWS has always said that they're a very driven feedback culture, which is a critical
Absolutely.
principle in DevOps.
Mhm.
So you as a community member, anybody who's interested in maybe getting involved or applying next year, you have a chance to really directly impact and amplify other voices in your communities and bring those voices to the table. It's one of the things I talk to a lot of organizations about. You want to really be effective in the cloud for a long duration, you need to find a way to get involved in the dialogue part of it. It's the same thing with open source. You get out of it what you put into it. And I think
Yes.
AWS has been strong with that. Community Builders program is a great example of that.
100%.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, it's in the past, like, definitely I've seen AWS folks respond on Twitter, respond
Yep.
to support cases, but I think having that Slack, having that real-time communications channel, right, where they can quickly get, feedback on ideas, where they can see that confusion, right? Like that helps them improve the product so much, right? Like we've seen them, ask questions like, hey, how big do you think the M6 GD instance should be? How big do you think the SSD should be, right? Like, and they get a straw poll, and that helps them figure out how much SSD are they putting in those machines.
Well, yeah, and a lot of customer obsession is just driven by that. Like we're listening, we're out there, we need to understand what are the problems that you care about, right? Because it's wonderful if you've got a suite of services and products, but if they don't answer your needs, we haven't helped you. And having that relentless obsession on I need to focus on customers, we need to be able to listen to customers. That's why I focus on the teams that I support in developer relations and advocacy. Yes, we're there on Twitter, we're there on LinkedIn, Dev2, et cetera. Like we're here and we're listening. We want to hear feedback and perspectives. The other thing that I'll give a shout out to is reach out to folks in community and ask your questions. Like that's how we can all make things better. Coming back to something you said earlier, Yvonne, which is, you both attended the same session. You got two completely different sets of things out of it. That perspective, again, sometimes enables transformation and how we rethink possible because, oh, shucks, I hadn't considered it from that point of view. And the more that we can start to bring in those
Right.
diverse voices, the more that we can bring in those diverse perspectives, I think that that's really, really good. And again, that lifts everyone up.
Yeah, and right, like community builders don't just represent our own companies, right? Like we represent the community at large, right? Like if I hear something from another AWS user, I'll share it with the AWS product team, right? Even if it's not my specific use case.
100%.
That's
So I
funny.
actually, go ahead.
Just last night, I was on the AWS Amplified Discord. We have a Discord channel as well. Feel free to check it out.
Nice.
And someone asked, how can I have a Cognito admin reset another user's password through Amplify? And currently, that's not a feature. And I'm just diving in. I was like, well, you can do it with with just the normal primitive APIs. I was like, well, let me go ahead and draft up not just a blog post, but let me get a PR set so that we can include that. And had it not been for their question, that never would have gotten brought up into discussion.
That's
So
awesome.
it really is the community at large. It is your feedback driving how this works. It's a really amazing feedback loop that AWS has set up.
All right. I want to actually give one of the questions, and thanks everybody for responding back and forth on Twitch. One of the questions that we've had from Pratik 508 is they want to learn the skills that are required for an AWS Cloud Support Associate. How would you get started? What do we all think about? Where do you find those certs? What do you do? How do I begin to learn? Bart?
Well, I'll give you the quick spiel. There's three underlying technologies for me in cloud. Cloud itself is not a technology; it's a service offering. So, sidle up against virtualization, automation, and networking. I mean, these are the big principles that are out there. It's in the name AWS. You're talking web services. So if you can begin building an understanding of those, the other big thing to remember is that with cloud computing, it's the workloads. Ultimately, in the end, it's the workloads that we're all here to try to support. So it isn't even about the cloud vendor. It's about understanding what these workloads need to do to solve business problems. So a lot of people are better equipped for cloud careers than they think they are because they know a lot about business. So I really encourage people to move
Yeah.
sideways through these industries.
I think, yeah, it's not necessarily about the certification, right? The certification is a measurement, a yardstick to, prove to an employer or to prove to yourself that you know a certain set of technologies. But I think ultimately, right, like go back to the business problem. What's the business problem you're trying to solve, right? And the answer is, you are trying to improve the lives of your customers or the lives of your coworkers, right? How do we do it? Well, we write software, we run it in the cloud, right? So do you know how to spin up cloud instances, right? Do you know how to provision code to those instances? Do you know how to manage them, right? Like, I think that's really what the intent of the certification program is. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily approach it from the mentality of, I want to learn this curriculum, right? Start instead by motivating yourself with a problem you want to solve and then learn what you need in order to solve that problem. And then go back and, get the certificate for what you've learned.
Yeah, and I think also when you focus about problems you care about, you're much more invested in wanting to do that learning than, okay, here's some abstract curricula that I don't know, I don't care, why am I doing these things versus this is really bothering me and I want to be able to solve it. I mean, that's how I got started. Like I was ticked off saying I can't figure out how these things are happening. I need to be able to wrangle and work with the data. Okay, I've got to figure out a way forward. And when you've got that investment in your curiosity, this is a basis of a problem, then that's always good. And I just want to give a shout out to Bart's comment. Figure out what's the objective of what you're trying to accomplish instead of I just want to have the tick. I mean, certs are great, awesome, but don't just get them for the sake of getting them. What are they in service of, and what's the objective that you're trying to do? Yeah.
And it could just be a fun project too, right? Like,
Definitely.
T4D instances are free until March, I think. So just spin one up, and deploy a toy project to it. Or even like if you don't have a toy project in mind, there's the real world apps, which are a medium.com clone. So you can go and provision one of those apps and just see, can I get this to work? Can I get a kind of microblogging framework up on AWS? And then after that, congratulations, you've set up a blog.
I think the big key here is start, right? Start tinkering, start playing,
Yeah.
dig into the docs, ask questions, and it all kind of just falls in line if you take that approach. Be curious, I think is the biggest key there.
Go build now.
Definitely. Right. Shout out to Andrew Brown again and the whole 100 Days of Code crew. Definitely check them out. They have a curriculum set up and sample projects on how to get started with AWS. I did want to circle back on certificates because I know that's always a debate within the community itself.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in hearing everybody's take on it. My personal feeling is that they, as Liz said, they're a yardstick. It just measures your ability. However, that doesn't mean that they aren't without value, especially for those that come from underrepresented backgrounds. They can be the key that lowers that barrier to entry and gives you that leg up when
Yeah.
unfortunately you'd be otherwise unconsidered.
I totally agree. I find that with certifications, there's real world learning and then there's certifications. If a certification helps you have the confidence to go and land a gig, that's a good objective. You should go and get certified. If there is a role that you want at this company, or maybe you're trying to move to a specific location, I always tell people to start big picture. Where in the world ideally could I work? What companies could I work? What industries could I work in? And then start looking for the job positions out there and say, okay, now it looks like these certs are attached to that. So that gives me a direction. But now I'm not just aimlessly certifying without an objective. So I really try to encourage people to tie it down to some specific goal. Or if you're moving somewhere in your company and know this position requires that, then yeah, absolutely consider the certifications. And then the community is here to help you learn.
Yeah, and certainly knowing the companies and the culture also makes a big difference, right? What company A cares about and considers meets the bar for what we need may be very different than what company B means because they're simply looking at their candidates differently. Do your research and do your homework, but also that's where leverage the community and get a sense of, so what is it like to be at these particular organizations, or what have you found that it takes to be successful? Using those internal networks to not only do your homework, understand, but then get perspective. Is this someplace where I really feel that I can be successful? This plays to my strengths, and I can do great things there. That's part of what it is, more than just let me have a tick list of all the certs and now I can suddenly go to company A, B, C, or D. Like, it's more than that. It's the whole picture of learning, and I would also just say the whole picture of, well, why are you choosing to do what you've done, right? And can you demonstrate excellence with it? Can you demonstrate mastery with it? Can you keep playing with it, right? Like, all of that sort of stuff I think is extremely important.
I also really encourage people who are just getting into any tech career, even if you got a job right now. There are people who have and use tech and affect tech decisions in places you would not expect. So your church partners, your religious friends, your community members, your kids' teachers. I mean, all of these people are using technology somewhere, and they have ties to other places. So
Yep.
early on, start taking on little gigs, whatever you can get into. And I'm talking, maybe this is your first IT gig, but just start taking that on. You're going to get a chance to build, understand. You're going to learn more about what you like, which industries you do or do not want to be a part of. And you're that much richer for the experience. And you might even be able to put a little money in your pocket on the side as you go on that adventure, which is always a bonus.
I'm sure we can all think of a few local businesses that haven't been doing so well because of the COVID epidemic that
Offer
could
your
probably
services.
use some help in getting managed and set up in the cloud. That'd be great.
I think there's also a lot of volunteer opportunities, with schools and different things that they need somebody to come in and kind of, teach kids, maybe bearable and basic programming, how to program one of these little mini robots that, just literally goes across the carpet, goes from point A to point B. I mean, kids, like, they get a kick out of that. And
That's
then you
awesome.
also kind of learn a little bit more of like, okay, well, maybe I can take this robot to the next level and have it like throw a ball or do something else.
But
That
also
I think is
think
cool.
about what that means for representation and the image that you give to those students, right? So I've worked
Exactly.
previously as an internship coordinator, and part of the reason I was asked to join was they wanted to see a different face. You need to give this perspective to these students that tech comes from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different skill sets, and you too can be the face of it because for folks, you can't be what you can't see, right? So if we can be out there as beacons and of champions of this is what's possible in tech, and you can be that representative for the next generation of learners and builders, I think that's really, really powerful to make that impact in communities. Because you might think, okay, so I did a school thing at some fifth grade class, whatever. But what you don't know is maybe you were inspiring someone who goes on to be, the next senior principal engineer at such and such, right? I mean, the impact goes beyond the one single day and the one single exercise. But I think part of what's amazing about community builders and user group leaders and community heroes is you do see this sense of here is how we are representatives and leaders in community. Here's how we're enabling others. And here's how we're showing that what it means to be in tech is a globally diverse, inclusive, and very respectful environment where we're bringing one another up. And certainly that's something that we want to do more than aspire to. We want to make sure we're bringing that change forward.
Yeah, I think that we need to both uplift people who are going to be future leaders as well as uplifting people who are currently in our workplaces. And the other thing that I'd say is that, with the COVID pandemic going on, there's a lot of need for mutual aid support groups, right? And in particular, I know that in my neighborhood in New York, where I lived before, there was a community called Bed-Stuy Strong that was basically getting phone calls, right, from people who needed help with groceries and was trying to figure out how do we keep track of, who needs groceries, where are we delivering that, right? Like that's an opportunity where someone from the community can really step up and, build an app who can really help coordinate the delivery of those groceries. And it's so critical in this time right now.
Hey, shout out
Absolutely.
to AWS Location Services for dropping. That's a new.
Yeah.
That was a super easy plug. That came out. It allows for delivery options.
All
Love it.
right. Well, we've just got about 3 minutes left before we've got a wrap for today. First, again, I am so grateful to have so many amazing builders with me on this edition of Community Voices. Folks, for everyone that's tuning in, what is your closing message or key point that you'd like them to remember, whether it's from ReInvent or whether it's from this discussion that we've had today?
Well, I'm in the top left, so I'll start off there. Friends, what got me into it was tools. It was always about the tools. That's what got me here, the things that I can do with these tools. And later on, it became the people that I can help and the problems that I can solve with them. So build that love of tools, and you're going to do a great job out there in the information technology world, and look for a chance to build together. And I think that's the biggest message that I see and what I love about the Builders program. Thanks again for letting me be a part of it.
The message I'd give people is focus on the operability of your software, right? Like don't just focus on the building, focus on the maintaining. Every piece of software has a lifetime. So that's why it's really important to think about building it on the right support structure so that other people can take it on after you.
I think the big piece is, get started, start tinkering, start playing, and ask questions. We are all here for you, and we all want to see you succeed.
For me, I got started because I was lazy. I'm gonna be fully honest about that. So using managed services, it really opened the door. And you transition that, right? You say, well, I'm gonna move slower in the beginning, and this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Is when you start jumping into these cloud native services, you move slower, but in the long term, it definitely accelerates. And you just package all that up, and you push that onto the next person so that they can learn as well. And that's how you form your community.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all again, community builders, for joining us. For everyone that's tuned in, thank you for your time and the privilege of your attention. And for folks that are interested in becoming community builders, definitely take a look out for that application. We want you to apply when the next cohort opens up in the spring. And with that, I'll close it out. I'm Aileen Gemma Smith. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Community Voices.